The story behind the title, Life. The judge says it. Then the black teen calls his dad the U.S. Attorney General is powerful because it speaks to justice, perception, and the weight of assumptions in society. It begins with a courtroom scene where a black teenager, young and full of potential, stands before a judge who pronounces a life sentence. That one word, life, carries more than just legal weight. It carries history, stereotypes, and the echo of countless similar moments where young men and women are written off, judged not only for their mistakes, but for the color of their skin. The judge believes he has delivered the final word, closing the chapter on this young man's future, assuming there is no one of importance standing behind him. But the story takes a dramatic turn when the teen makes a phone call, not in anger or despair, but with a quiet sense of power, dialing his father, the U.S. Attorney General. This twist reveals more than just an unexpected family connection. It strips away the judge's assumptions and exposes the biases that drive many decisions in systems of power. Too often, society looks at a black teenager and makes a decision before hearing the full story. The young man is judged not only by the law, but also by preconceived ideas of who he is and where he comes from. The revelation that his father is the highest law officer in the country challenges the entire narrative. Suddenly, the courtroom that once seemed to hold all the power for the judge becomes a place of accountability. It highlights the idea that positions of power do not erase the injustice of assumption, but they can expose it when the truth comes out. At its heart, this story is about the dangers of underestimating people. The judge thought he understood the boy's entire life from a file, a charge, and a stereotype. He thought life was the end of the story. But the truth is, every person has more to their story than what the world sees on the surface. The young man's phone call shattered the illusion that he was powerless, reminding us that appearances never tell the whole truth. It forces us to ask how many others are judged and sentenced not on their actual worth or potential, but on assumptions built by race, class, or status. The speech also speaks to resilience. Imagine being that teenager, hearing the word, life, and knowing the system has already decided your fate. Yet instead of collapsing, he chooses action. He calls his father. That act is not only about privilege, it is about refusing to accept that the judge's word is the final word. It is about finding strength in connection, in family, and in refusing to let others define who you are. That resilience is a lesson for everyone who has been underestimated or wrongly judged. Even when the world says it's over, you can still fight, you can still rise, and you can still rewrite the story. There is also a lesson for those who hold authority. The judge in this story represents how power can be abused or misused when it is combined with prejudice. But the shock of realizing who the teenager's father is forces accountability. It shows that no matter how high someone's position, justice must be applied with fairness and humility. It reminds us that people in power must look beyond stereotypes and see humanity first, because every life has value and every story deserves to be heard. On a deeper level, this moment reflects the broader struggles of inequality. It shows how justice can look very different depending on who you are and what people assume about you. The young man's experience is a symbol of the countless times black men and women have been dismissed, undervalued, or unfairly punished because of a system that does not see their full humanity. But it also becomes a moment of revelation that challenges those same systems to confront their flaws. Ultimately, this story is not just about one teen, one judge, or one courtroom. It is about all of us and the way we see people. It forces us to confront our own assumptions and ask, how often do we decide someone's worth without knowing their story? The word, life, in this context is more than a sentence. It is a challenge to recognize that every life has meaning, that no one should be dismissed because of race or circumstance, and that the truth can overturn even the harshest judgment. It is a reminder that justice is not about power, but about fairness, and that real strength lies in the ability to see beyond what is visible. The weight of assumptions is one of the heaviest burdens that people carry, and in the story of a black teen being sentenced to life by a judge, those assumptions sit at the very center. When the judge utters the word, life, it is not just a sentence handed down in a courtroom. It is the product of a system shaped by centuries of bias, quick judgments, and stereotypes that follow certain groups of people like a shadow. The judge does not simply see a teenager. He sees what his assumptions have painted in his mind: a criminal, a threat, a statistic. Without even realizing it, he has already closed the door on the boy's potential, convinced himself that this young man is undeserving of a second chance, and allowed prejudice to guide what should have been justice. The power of assumptions lies in how invisible they often are. The judge may not have consciously thought of himself as biased. He may have believed he was only following the law, reading the facts, applying the rules. But the truth is that assumptions slip into the smallest cracks of decision-making. They dictate how harshly a person is judged, how their story is interpreted, and how little compassion they are shown. When the teen stands in front of him, the judge sees not just one case, but the weight of stereotypes he has been conditioned to believe. That assumption becomes a sentence, not just legally, but socially, emotionally, and spiritually. This is not something unique to courtrooms. Assumptions happen everywhere in daily life. People are often judged by the way they look, where they come from, or the color of their skin long before their story is ever heard. A student might be written off as lazy when they are struggling with things at home. An employee might be dismissed as unqualified without being given the chance to show their skills. Entire communities are sometimes treated as if they have no worth simply because society has already decided who they are. These assumptions do not just wound. They create barriers, limit opportunities, and shape destinies in ways that can feel impossible to escape. In the story, the assumption is shattered the moment the teen picks up the phone and calls his father, who happens to be the U.S. Attorney General. The same boy who was treated as though his life was disposable suddenly has undeniable power standing behind him. The judge, who thought his word was final, is forced to confront the fact that he never really knew who this young man was. His assumption blinded him, and now the truth has stripped him of control. That moment exposes how fragile assumptions are. They appear strong, shaping entire outcomes, but they can crumble in an instant when confronted with reality. The weight of assumptions is not only carried by those who judge, but also by those who are judged. For the teen, hearing the word, life, is not just about prison. It is about the crushing realization that he has been reduced to an image, a stereotype, a label that does not reflect who he really is. It is a reminder of how society often chooses to see people not for their humanity, but for the narrative it has already written for them. That weight can break a person, but in this case, the teen resists it. He does not let the assumption define his end. He takes action, making a call that reveals the truth of his life and rewrites the judge's narrative in one powerful move. This story teaches that assumptions are dangerous because they rob people of their individuality. They silence stories before they are told and deliver verdicts before facts are even heard. But it also teaches that assumptions can be broken. Every person carries more than what is visible, more than what others may think they know. Behind every face is a story that can challenge the shallow judgments of the world. The black teen in this story is a reminder that no one should be confined by the assumptions of others, because those assumptions are rarely the truth. Power and privilege often lie hidden until a situation arises that forces them into the light, and in the story of the black teen standing before a judge, this becomes unmistakably clear. When the judge declares the sentence of life, he does so believing that the teen has no real defense, no strong backing, and no influence to change the course of what he has decided. To the judge, it seems final, unquestionable, and absolute. But the moment the young man reaches for the phone and calls his father, the entire atmosphere of the courtroom shifts. Suddenly, the people in power realize that this is not just any teen, but the son of the U.S. Attorney General, a man with immense influence, authority, and access to the highest levels of the legal system. What was thought to be a simple case of punishment becomes a reflection of how power can instantly alter outcomes. The power of this moment lies in contrast. Before the call, the teen was viewed as powerless, stripped of dignity, and trapped under the weight of the system. After the call, his position transforms completely. He is no longer just a boy in trouble. He becomes a symbol of how quickly privilege and connections can change the narrative. The very same judge who spoke the sentence with confidence now stands exposed, his decision no longer unshakable, but vulnerable to scrutiny. It shows that power is not always about fairness or justice, but about who holds influence and who has the resources to fight back. This story also uncovers the uncomfortable truth about privilege in society. Many people face the justice system with no powerful parent to call, no influential ally to defend them, and no voice loud enough to challenge unfair treatment. They remain trapped by decisions that may not reflect true justice, but are cemented by the lack of privilege to contest them. The teen's story highlights this inequality. While his phone call saves him, millions of others in similar situations cannot escape because they do not have someone powerful waiting on the other end of the line. Privilege, in this sense, becomes the dividing line between those who are crushed by the system and those who can bend it. At the same time, the moment exposes how fragile authority can be when confronted by someone of equal or greater power. The judge, who once seemed untouchable, is suddenly hesitant, knowing that his actions will be questioned at the highest level. He has to reckon with the fact that he assumed dominance over a boy who actually belonged to a sphere of influence he could not easily control. The imbalance of power flips, and with it, the entire perception of justice in that room is shaken. This theme resonates deeply beyond the courtroom. In everyday life, people with privilege, whether through wealth, status, education, or connections, often find themselves shielded from the harshest realities that others endure. They may be given second chances where others are not, offered opportunities where others are ignored, or defended fiercely where others are abandoned. Privilege becomes a shield, while the lack of it becomes a sentence in itself. The teen's ability to transform his fate with a single phone call demonstrates this reality in its clearest form. Yet, what makes this story powerful is not only the revelation of privilege, but the way it forces reflection on the value of fairness. True justice should never depend on who you know, how much you have, or what your last name is. It should depend on facts, compassion, and equality. But when privilege tips the scales, it reveals how imperfect human systems are and how important it is to question them. The black teen's act of calling his father may have saved him, but it also shines a spotlight on the countless others who are left voiceless, reminding us that privilege is both a gift for some and a barrier for others. Resilience is often born in the moments when the world seems to be pressing down with its full weight. And the story of the black teen standing before the judge reflects this truth with striking clarity. Imagine what it means to hear the word life, spoken by someone in authority, a word meant not to describe hope or opportunity, but a word that chains a person's future to confinement, a word meant to strip away possibility. For many, that word would mark the end of hope, the breaking point where despair takes over. Yet for this young man, the story does not end there. He refuses to surrender his spirit to the judgment handed to him. Instead, he acts with resilience, reaching for the phone and choosing to fight back, even when the system seems immovable. That single action, picking up the phone, symbolizes far more than just making a call. It is a statement that he will not be defined by the labels others place on him. It is a refusal to accept injustice as final. Resilience is not about pretending pain doesn't exist. It is about standing tall, even when the ground beneath you shakes. The teen's resilience is revealed not in loud protests or dramatic speeches, but in quiet determination, in the simple yet powerful decision to use the tools he does have to alter what others claim is unchangeable. Resilience also means refusing to be reduced to stereotypes. The judge's decision may have been shaped by assumptions. Assumptions about race, about youth, about who the teen was before he even spoke for himself. To many in the courtroom, he was already guilty by appearance, already a statistic rather than a human being. But the teen's choice to fight back shattered those assumptions. He showed that he was not powerless, not a victim to be pitied, but a fighter with strength in his spirit. That resilience turned the tide in a situation where surrender seemed the only option. Life often brings moments where the odds are stacked against us, where voices of authority or the weight of circumstance tell us there is no way out. Resilience is the act of not letting those voices write the final chapter. It is the strength to keep moving, to look for another path, to believe that the story is not over, even when others declare it is. The teen's resilience in that courtroom reflects a universal lesson. We cannot control every judgment, every injustice, or every door that closes, but we can control our refusal to give up. There is also a quiet courage and resilience that inspires others. Imagine the other young people who might hear his story, who might feel crushed by labels, by unfair treatment, or by circumstances that tell them they are less than enough. His act of standing firm, of using his voice, sends a message that no matter how powerful the forces against you seem, there is still a way to resist. Resilience does not always win in an instant, but it keeps the spirit alive until the breakthrough comes. The moment the teen made that call, he did more than save himself. He gave a living example of how resilience transforms despair into determination. The judge's word, life, was meant to be an ending, but through resilience, it became a turning point. And that is the heart of resilience, turning endings into beginnings, taking the weight of injustice and using it as the fuel to keep standing. Power has a way of exposing itself when it is challenged, and accountability is its necessary partner. In the story of the black teen who stands in a courtroom, the judge's decision of life seems absolute. For a moment, it feels as though the gavel has the final say, as though the boy's future is sealed without question. Yet when the teen calls his father, the U.S. Attorney General, the entire meaning of power shifts. The judge, once untouchable in that space, is suddenly forced to confront that his actions are no longer hidden behind the walls of authority. He is now accountable, not just to the boy he condemned, but to someone who holds even greater power within the justice system. That instant reveals a universal truth: the authority without accountability is dangerous, but true justice demands both. The courtroom is meant to be a place where fairness reigns, but the reality is often more complicated. Those who hold positions of authority, like the judge, sometimes let bias, assumption, or unchecked control guide their decisions. When power is left unchallenged, it can shape lives unjustly, and often those with the least influence suffer the most. But accountability breaks through that illusion of absolute power. The teen's father represents that accountability, not only because of his status, but because his very presence forces the system to look at itself in the mirror. It is one thing to sentence a young man who appears powerless. It is another thing entirely to stand before the Attorney General and defend that judgment. This moment reflects the broader struggle between unchecked power and the demand for responsibility. The judge believed his word carried finality, but when challenged, it revealed cracks in the foundation of his authority. Accountability changes the dynamic. It makes those in positions of power realize that their decisions are not beyond review, that their actions have consequences beyond the courtroom walls. It reminds us that even those who sit at the highest seats of justice must themselves be measured against the standards they claim to uphold. The teen's call also highlights how accountability is not just about exposing injustice, but about creating change. When people in power know they will be held responsible, they act differently. They think more carefully. They weigh decisions more cautiously, and they remember that their actions impact real lives, not just case numbers. Without accountability, power becomes a weapon. With accountability, it has the chance to become a tool for fairness. This is why the story resonates so deeply. It shows that the balance of justice depends not just on authority, but on the responsibility that comes with it. Beyond the courtroom, this theme speaks to everyday life. In workplaces, schools, governments, and homes, authority without accountability leads to corruption, abuse, and harm. But when accountability is enforced, when people are made to answer for their actions, systems change. The judge's sudden awareness that the teen was not powerless but connected to a force higher than his own is a reminder that accountability can shake even the most confident misuse of power. This point also raises an uncomfortable truth. Not everyone has access to accountability. The teen's father held a position that demanded respect, which forced the judge to reconsider. But countless others face sentences, decisions, and judgments without anyone powerful to call, leaving them trapped in systems that rarely check themselves. That contrast reveals why accountability is not just important. It is essential for justice to mean anything at all. True fairness cannot depend on who you know. It must depend on principles that protect everyone equally. The story strips authority down to its core. Power without accountability is fragile and dangerous, but accountability ensures that power serves its purpose instead of serving itself. The judge's loss of control in that moment is more than just a twist in a narrative. It is a reminder that every authority must answer to something greater than itself. The courtroom may have seemed like the judge's domain, but accountability revealed that even he was not beyond scrutiny, and that realization changes the balance of power forever. Every life carries weight, value, and dignity, but too often, systems and individuals forget this simple truth. In the story of the black teen standing before a judge, this message becomes painfully clear. When the judge delivers the sentence of life, it reflects not only a judgment on the crime, but also a judgment on the teen's worth. It is as if, in that moment, the judge is saying that this young man's life is disposable, that his future has no real meaning beyond punishment. Yet the twist, that this teen is the son of the U.S. Attorney General, forces the room to confront the reality that his life does matter, and by extension, so do the lives of those who are often overlooked or dismissed. The story becomes a reminder that every human being, regardless of background, race, or circumstance deserves to be seen as valuable. The tragedy of many injustices lies in the way people are reduced to categories. A black teen in a courtroom is often viewed not as a unique individual with dreams, family, and potential, but as a stereotype shaped by society's assumptions. When judgment is based on appearances or bias rather than humanity, the value of a life is diminished. The power of this story is that it flips that perception upside down. The judge, so quick to dismiss the boy's worth, is forced to recognize that he is not just another defendant. He is a son, a person with connections, a life that carries weight. In that realization is the lesson. Every person's life has that same worth, even if society doesn't always acknowledge it. The value of life does not depend on titles, positions, or the influence of family. The teen's father being the attorney general makes the point dramatic. But the deeper truth is that even if his father had been a janitor, a teacher, or unemployed, his life would still hold the same intrinsic value. The problem is that systems often measure worth by status, ignoring the fundamental humanity that exists in everyone. By bringing attention to this imbalance, the story challenges us to question how often we overlook the dignity of those who seem powerless, how often we fail to see the value in those who do not hold influence. This theme extends beyond the courtroom and into everyday life. How often are people judged by the clothes they wear, the jobs they hold, the neighborhoods they live in, or the color of their skin? How many times are lives written off as meaningless simply because they do not fit the mold of success or influence? When a judge says, "Life," it may be in a courtroom, but society pronounces similar judgments in subtle ways every day, labeling, dismissing, or ignoring the worth of others. To counter this, we must remember that every life has untapped potential, every person has a story, and every individual deserves respect. The beauty of the teen's story is not only in his personal victory, but in the mirror it holds up to the rest of us. If his life is worth protecting because of who his father is, then logically, every life should be worth protecting simply because it is life. This challenges us to rethink justice, to rethink fairness, and to rethink how we view one another. It pushes us to break free from the idea that worth is earned by status and instead embrace the truth that worth is inherent in existence. Every life matters because each one carries the possibility of change, growth, and contribution. To dismiss a life as worthless is to deny the potential impact it could have on the world. The black teen's story highlights how quickly perceptions can shift when someone is revealed to be more than what assumptions suggest. That shift should not depend on power or titles. It should be the default way we see each other. Respect, dignity, and value should not be privileges for a few, but the foundation of how we treat all. This story, at its core, is not just about one teen and one judge. It is about the universal truth that life itself carries meaning. The courtroom setting dramatizes this truth, but it applies everywhere in schools, in workplaces, in neighborhoods, when in personal relationships. When we begin to see every life as valuable, the way we act, speak, and make decisions changes. Justice becomes fairer, communities become stronger, and humanity becomes more compassionate.